I've said the word Sixth Sense about 19 times already, but they have a very good content marketing game
it was
going on,
It
right?
was just 9 times. I was counting.
Hello and welcome to episode 323 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast, a proud member of the Marketing Podcast Network. It's Monday the 25th of May. I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm not a rockstar, but I am a full-time B2B CMO, and apologies for the delay in posting this week. More on that in a bit, but if it's a holiday where you are, I hope you're enjoying the long weekend. The intention of this podcast is to inspire your inner marketing rockstar, and for this week's dose of marketing street knowledge, I'm joined by former Forrester Research Director Jeff Clark to discuss getting your content into the LLMs, and I dip into the virtual bar archive for a relevant chat with Robert Rose and one of his classic cocktails. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back. After this word.
We'll be right back.
After this word. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Ian Truscott. You may know me as the host of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast, but I'm here to share that we're kicking off the inaugural MPN Podcast Awards, which will be hosted by Gordon Glenister, podcaster, author, and the Don of influencer marketing. What say you, Gordon?
The Marketing Podcast Network is a community of marketers who podcast. And we thought it was high time to recognize the podcasts that we love, marketing podcasts. But these awards aren't just about the shows on our network. The MPN Awards are open to all marketing podcasts. And this is our chance to shine a light on the voices right across the entire marketing podcast community. So don't delay. Enter the MPN Awards.
You heard Gordon. Let us know your favourite marketing podcast and enter at mpn-awards.com or follow the Marketing Podcast Network on LinkedIn for all of our updates.
Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
Hello, Ian. Welcome to the Rockstar CMO studio.
Thank you very much, mate. How are you doing?
I am doing well. As I mentioned before we got on here, it is very hot here in New England. It's, getting over 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And so we tried to get our outdoor activities out of the way before we could come in and turn the air conditioning on.
Yeah, because it's noon peak, isn't it? It's noon peak for you as we record this. It's 5 o'clock in the evening for me. So
yeah. It's only going to get hotter for a few hours, and then I don't know. It's like if we go from basic spring weather to all of a sudden weather where, oh my God, it's not even going to cool off at night. What the heck's going on?
Yeah, I remember it well.
Yeah.
Here we're going through some. I think same as when I was chatting with you last week. It's rain showers, rainstorms, and some sunshine. The weather's warming up a bit apparently, so we're going to get some warm weather coming up. We've got a bank holiday weekend again coming up in a month. So. Yeah.
Go Banks. I always love that expression. Bank holidays.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Whereas I think you refer to federal holidays, don't you? As the ones that people take. Where you see, you think you guys, as the big capitalists, we would be the ones that go on about bank holidays.
Well, I always joke with my son who is living in Norway, and they have Ascension Day off, and they have Easter Friday, or they have Good Friday, and they have Easter Monday, and I'm like, aren't you guys like a atheist culture these days?
Well, same with us. Whereas we have the head of our country is the head of the Church of England. So that's
right. He's the head of a lot of things. I wonder if he keeps them up at night.
What do you expect? Anyway, let's get back on the topic. So this week, and I don't know how to make a segue from that particular topic to the topic we're discussing, so I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to ignore it. So we're returning to, and as regular listeners know, whenever we hit a topic where we're like, oh, this is a rabbit hole, we better save it for another time, we make a note. And we're returning to a rabbit hole that we skipped over from my research in episode 317. Because we were talking about buyers not being blank slate. So the fact they're now coming into the buying journey a bit more educated, and obviously, and also this topic has popped up a few times over the last few months because we've been talking about predictions and stuff. And it's very much a concern for digital marketers who are looking to extend or maintain their organic reach in the age of LLMs and Google AI overviews. And that topic is, how can we get our brand, content, or point of view in front of our audience when every buyer, decision maker, and executive has invited a new persona to the buying table, their AI assistant? What say you, Jack?
Well, I was conjuring the image of the guy at the table that, what do they put in, like a little paper cutout or a little robot model to say, okay, what do you think about this? So, after a discussion we had, in that episode, and we were like thinking about, well, it's really important. And I think this came up a couple of times where we said, it's really important for, us as marketers to get our content, accessible by the LLM. So I just decided I was going to ask ChatGPT what it would take to have our marketing content picked up by it and other LLMs. And, it politely replied, and I want to emphasize it was very polite, that it's less about gaming the model and more about making your content structured, explicit, and unambiguous. So then I was like, well, this is kind of like writing for search engine optimization or just writing for good practice for writing real people. We want to be thinking about writing, in this case, and I think that this partial quote is like writing for a very fast, literal reader that values clarity over persuasion. Of course, as marketers, we like to do a lot of persuasion, so this becomes somewhat anathema for us. And it does sound like it's the fundamental of just using good English, and which at least for our English speaking audiences makes sense. But I did, and I obviously we didn't just ask ChatGPT. There are other sources, although there weren't a lot out there. I was expecting to find some things from some of the big analyst agencies, but there was one from a consulting group called Enterprise Knowledge, how to prepare content for AI, which basically paralleled what ChatGPT said in some of the points we're going to pull out today.
Well, I thought it was a bit meta, you reaching for the LLMs when we're talking about buyers reaching for the LLMs, but that actually makes a lot of sense. Now, I think we alluded to that in the previous show and made a reference to this, right? And we could almost end the show now with that piece of advice. It's just about having well-structured, good content, right? Like that people and robots can read.
Well, okay, if you want to end now, I could go hit a swimming hole.
However, as is the editorial policy around here, we're going to give the topic the 5 effing tips treatment. And you're going first as usual, so what's your number one, Jack?
Lead with clear, structured need definition. And by need, I mean, like business needs. So you want to be clear about what you're offering, what is it for, what problems does it solve, and because the potential buyer is going to be asking, how do I, as an example, protect my website from cyber attacks? So the LLM wants you to be able to address the buyer's question directly. And so the more you skirt around the question, or add marketing fluff, the less willing the LLM will be to use your content to help address that question. And then the less likely it'll try to show links or drill downs to the content that either you have or people that are sort of in your content ecosystem have, which would help cite you as an authoritative vendor on this topic. So also, in the enterprise knowledge post, they said that you should chunk longer content into smaller components because AI likes to quickly identify snippets of content related to a larger text. So make it easy for them to kind of search through, go identify, here's a good source of content. Now I'm going to search through other relevant material. So, if your web or your portal content is organized by a, componentized content management system, then you're doing it properly, you may be ahead of the game on this. Otherwise, but you got to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I also heard advice to provide, like the way that you structure it, and you produce your content in markup language and things like that, right? It's about the structure of the language as well as the structure in which you present it, isn't it?
Correct.
In terms of the markup and stuff. And I think this was actually the entrance to the rabbit hole we skipped over in the previous episode when we got to that. That optimizing for LLMs is just good content practice, and we've talked about that a lot, or maybe it's just me, about how B2B tech websites, they fail to express what their products is for, right? So they quickly dip into, and so I think it's really interesting. The advice for the LLMs is cut the marketing fluff, cut all the business buzzwords, just say what you mean, say what you do, right? So I'm here for that. This is great.
I like the phrase. It's like, it's for a really quick reader. Really quick reader. I don't have a lot of time for your BS about you're the leader in this space, that space, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So Ian, you're bringing up point number 2 for our listening audience. What is it?
Yeah, so I think that, and again, this is straight out of the good content marketing practice playbook, and that is to publish useful things. So what I was thinking about here is, you need to think about the sort of stuff that that the LLMs can't synthesize, right, or can't just go get, right? So this is like original research, case studies, well-structured frameworks for your approach to something, something that's original, that's useful to the person who's prompting the LLM, but it doesn't have it already in its data bank. So, and I think this is an act of generosity, right? Creating these ungated, useful things. And that's possibly why we and many commentators quote things like Sixth Sense and LinkedIn. I mean, we're always talking about those guys, right? Because the content is so available, the research is so good and so deep. And that's no different to the robots either, right? You and I talk about this Sixth Sense research all the time, right? And anything we can get our hands on, right, isn't gated. So and I think this idea as well is especially relevant.
We're too cheap to be paying for.
Yeah, well, we're not Gartner and Forrester clients, are we? So we have to go by what's been dealt, right? So and I think this is especially relevant if you're redefining a category, or you want the buyer to think differently about the problem you solve. As you're not necessarily asking, because people that are prompting the LLMs, they're asking to have their problem solved. They are asking for products. They're asking for solutions, right? So if your approach to the solution helps them find you, then you need to make sure that information is out there. And I also think that everybody knows that ChatGPT or the LLMs are they're lovely servants, aren't they? They want to serve something, and sometimes that means they'll hallucinate. But I think people are becoming aware of that and are asking them to provide their receipts, the sources of stats and quotes. And it's just a general good practice act of due diligence. I think we're all getting into that habit, and it's always been that habit. If you're an analyst or a researcher or a good writer, right? There's no difference. The last 2 decades of Googling, right? It should be standard behavior. But I think that people know they need to do that, and I think that helps you if you want to get, if you want to get noticed. So I think the important thing is make this stuff available as generously if you can. If you can encourage other humans to pick it up, it will also get on the radar of the LLMs and appear more credible. So if you look at I've said the word Sixth Sense about 19 times already, but they have a very good content marketing game. It was
just 9 times. I was counting.
They have a great content marketing game, right?
Yeah.
And so if everybody's picking up their content and putting it in Reddit or and I think you're going to talk about this, then that's all going to help. So I think you need to publish useful things. So that's my number 2.
So So number 3, I'm going to jump right into number 3 is maintain consistent naming and terminology. So things like how you talk about challenges, your product names, categories, like market categories, industry terms should be consistent. And, creative writers always want to use synonyms or create new market subcategories. I remember that when that was a big thing. Or heaven forbid, break your strict brand guidelines on product naming, because this will confuse the LLM, let alone the buyer who's scanning your content. So one of the things to think about is the terminology may vary across your different audiences. So if you sell into commercial business, public sector, education, or whatever, terms for simple things like an expense report, it can maybe called a travel voucher in the public sector. So you want to be able to make sure your content, this gets back to the structure, clearly branches into the different audiences and it ties it together. And you can use your content metadata to tie together the related subjects, the related authors, where the content's coming from, the categorization, to help tie needs and products and related solutions together. Then the users and AI can quickly identify the relevant section within the larger set of content that you have.
Yeah. And I didn't know if you were in a rush to get somewhere, because we stumbled straight into number 3 there, mate. You were keen to get going.
You look like you weren't ready to tee me up, so I figured I'd just jump in.
I don't know. Well, I'll be honest with you, mate, and for the listeners' benefit, Jeff's video is frozen, so I can't tell.
Oh my gosh. That's right.
So anyway, for me, this is really interesting, this conversation, and all the research I've done into this, right, is we're seeing a pattern when it comes to content. We need structure, an old school content plan, taxonomy, all these words, structure around topics and language, and all that stuff, and stop using the bullshit terms and all that kind of stuff. And so I think it's like the new business case for content operations, and I'm sure my friend Kathy McKnight would be delighted to hear that. Right,
Absolutely.
This is just, again, it's back to the fundamentals, isn't it? If you've got a really good discipline and hygiene around your content, then the LLMs are going to pick it up. So I think that sounds good to me. So what's your number 4, fella?
No, what's your number 4? Because
what's my number 4?
It's yours.
Because you broke it. All right. Yes, Jeff. Well, my number 4 is, I think the brand is still important, and we talk about brand quite a bit when we talk about these kind of topics. And I don't just mean our brand, our product, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sort of still working on this idea, but I make the connection with when voice search for shopping was a really hot topic a few years ago, and we were talking about how B2C brands would want the buyer to ask for them by name. They wouldn't ask for, I need a new pair of black sneakers, because the experience with voice is you don't get a whole page of results that you can peruse and find the one you like. You're going to get a definitive answer from, one of the big boxes like Amazon, right? The brands would want you to say, I would like a new pair of Nikes, or Nikes, depending on how you pronounce it, right? I know Nike is the right one. So that's there's that sort of, you want to get your brand language into the head of your potential buyer who's doing the research. And I think that's, the same for AI assistants, right? Because it's not going to give you a narrow answer and pages of results. And it's, for me, I was thinking it in B2B using an LLM, the equivalent might be something like, the prompt might be something like, compare HubSpot, Salesforce, and Pipedrive for our CRM capabilities. Those are the kind of questions they're going to ask. So we want our brand name to mention in that kind of chat, right? If they're going to set up these impromptu comparisons. But I also think, and this is a bit of a hypothesis in B2B, we're not just asking for them to talk about the brands, although it's important, obviously, if they could do those kinds of prompts, but thinking about what we need a human to ask the LLM to find us, our point of view, our research, our work, right, that we were just talking about. So, and we do that through our brand marketing, through paid and organic outside of the LLMs, right? We need to be consistent in our story and message, not just so that the LLMs pick this up, but like good SEO, it's the humans asking the questions need to use our language. So, if again, I was talking earlier about the scenario of defining a new category. especially as I think you mentioned, us marketers like to create new fancy acronyms and all that kind of good stuff, right? If you want buyers to start framing their prompts around our ideas, then that's what we need to be creating. So we still need that air cover to teach the buyer our language, so they put that language into the LLMs when they ask about us. I think that's the theory. Still working on it.
It's interesting. It also brings up, I think, an interesting challenge for the content because, if we have a unique way of addressing an existing, perhaps age-old problem, like speeding workflow processes, do we, use the current technology, workflow automation, MRM, go through all the 3-letter acronyms, et cetera, and competitive brands like Asana, Jira, Zapier to catch the AI's attention and then put our unique spin on it? It would seem that if we created a new niche and it created a new 3-letter acronym out of the gate, and then we were wrapping everything around that, then that would be kind of a showstopper for the LLMs to be able to pick up our content. So it's an interesting, I guess, dance I think we'd have to play between, talking about our unique values and our unique brand attributes we want to talk about, and maybe a whole new way of addressing an age-old problem.
But like you say, it's an age-old problem, right? And I think that that's always been the challenge when B2B marketers and founders decide, no, our approach is unique, and they create something brand new. They forget they're going to need to do a whole shitload of marketing around that new category they've created, not just about their products and their position in it. So this is just another audience for that campaign, right? And you've got to recognize that the LLMs aren't going to pick that up straight away. I think is what you're saying.
What made me just think about was when Salesforce was trying to break into the market, and it was all about cloud, and it's like, and they're up against other big CRM companies that either didn't have a big cloud presence or was certainly early in the market. It's like, so everything with them was about cloud, and you're like, well,
no software.
Well, it's like, well, maybe that. Would that work today? Would taking that approach work today? Or do you have to be a little bit more subtle about how you bring in that cloud differentiator?
I think it's interesting, but I think that, out of the B2B, that's straight out of the B2B playbook, isn't it? To differentiate and create a new category or redefine the category. And you've got to realize the LLMs are going to lag on that. Yeah. But you've got to do the work so that they pick it up. Anyway, what's number 5, fella?
Distribute content across high authority contexts. That's a bunch of loaded words there, but the thing is it's important to think about not just your owned properties, your website, maybe your documentation, your FAQs that are out there, your portals, whatever, because where LLMs will find your content. But think about the blogs from influencers and analysts that you have a relationship with. Think about review sites. Think about customer advocacy posts, and think about how are you linking all of those external content pieces to your own property, and does that fit well within your content architecture? So you're managing an ecosystem of content that is reflecting back on the problem you're solving for the buyer. And because the LMs are going to be looking for all of that stuff, and as much as you can, you want to manage how that ecosystem reflects well on you and your approach to the buyer's needs.
Yes, I think that's. That is exactly what we were saying, right? It's a campaign. It's a campaign behind your ideas, isn't it? And that's no different in a way. It's just underlining for everybody what those best practices are around content and distribution. And one of the other things, which I think is also interesting around this, pulling at a thread of old school strategies is, Robert has talked about this, is also sentiment, right? It's not just about getting your stuff out there, but what do people think about your stuff? So I think that, he's been looking at sort of trust, and it's important not only to have your content distributed, but understand how it's perceived. So, that old social media practice is relevant here, called sentiment analysis, right? Which is, we need to understand what sentiment maybe the LLMs are going to pick up about us, so that we can adjust on that too. So
absolutely.
So those are our 5. We whisked through those, didn't we?
Zoom.
Right. So I'll draw to the conclusion. I actually have an additional point. I didn't want to add 6. I didn't want to mess around with the policy. But it's worth. it's a worthy footnote, I think, because I saw an article. Where did I see this article? Let me just check. In Search Engine Journal. That's right. So OpenAI has officially launched the next phase of advertising inside ChatGPT, introducing a beta self-serve ads manager alongside new CPC bidding and expanded measurement tools. So I think that we have talked about, this conversation has been about organic, but I think, and the best practice of content marketing and SEO, but these platforms are going to need to monetize, right? They're figuring out where their money is going to come from to pay for all these machines. So I think LLMs will become part of our paid strategy as well. So I think the advice to marketers at the end of those 5 about the organic is trying to move, get familiar with these paid options too as soon as you can, because sometimes there's an early mover advantage with these platforms if you get in there quick. So that's any thoughts on that? Have you seen that stuff, Jeff? Is that
the one thing that I saw recently, which actually was from my old boss at Pegasystems, Mr. Treffler, was that AI is going to start getting expensive for the companies that use it, because so much of this has been free. And yes, you can pay for some sort of professional license and thing like that. But as you get addicted to it, you need it, or you have agents. And before we were talking about agentic prospecting, and so all of a sudden you've got all these things that are using AI, and now these companies do need to monetize their early investments, and so the costs are going to start ramping up. Which may I don't know. It may put either a bit of a break. I shouldn't say a break because it won't, but it may cause people to kind of like slow down and say, we can't go too far too quickly with this. But the use cases you're mentioning is like totally makes sense. They're going to just like with SEO, they're going to want to advertise within the basically the search tool that they're giving to you. Makes total sense.
Yeah. But I think about what's interesting for our research on this and those 5, right? And I think I've mentioned this before. It reminds me of the early days of accessibility on web pages. And it turned out that making websites accessible was just good for everybody. It just made them clearer, easy to read. It was better for SEO and all that kind of stuff. So it's just like well-structured, useful content without the fluff. Sounds like it's good for all of us, right? So, and again, we find ourselves talking about something new and shiny, and it's just about having good fundamentals, isn't it? We're always back to our effing fundamentals. So,
absolutely. And so, hopefully people who've listened to this say, oh gosh, we got to go back and when was the last time we audited our content? When's the last time we looked at what we're connected to our own external systems? Is it well structured? Is it consistent? And anytime you put any kind of framework together, it's going to last 2 to 3 years, and then you're going to have to look at it again and it's got to evolve with the time. So
that's really interesting about the fact that, do you want your dated content hanging around to be educating the LLMs? It's funny because today I had an alert on my phone through Google News, which I assume is AI driven, telling me about the tube strikes that are happening in London this week. They actually got cancelled yesterday, but this thing was like, warning, there are tube strikes. So the information it was using was out of date, and that's significant, right? And I know that's a silly example, but it's the same. If you look in your content back catalog that's being spidered by these things, or being indexed, whatever that calls, it may be have a completely wrong impression about what your product does or says, or any of those things.
It's funny you mentioned the tube strikes because the Long Island Railroad in New York, which is like one of the I think it's the biggest commuter rail in the country. Hundreds of thousands of people use it. So anyway, they had a 1-day strike, and it was the national news that they went on strike yesterday. And so if you picked up your news feed a day late, you wouldn't realize it was actually, the strike's called off, and it's like, I can't make it to town. What do you mean you can't make it to town? Because they're on strike. No, they're not.
And it's, we're seeing that with the LinkedIn algorithm, right? Is that people are announcing events 2 weeks in advance, and then LinkedIn is showing that content 3 weeks later in your feed.
Yes, I have seen that.
Anyway. Anyway, we got to get to the final agenda. Well, we don't have to. I can chat for longer if you like. But anyway, we get to the final agenda, picking the song. It's your turn this week. So what are we going for?
Well, the title kind of speaks for itself. You Speak My Language by a band called Morphine. It was apparently an indie band that was hot in the 90s. I think it's a U.S. band. And it was funny because as I looked it up, it's like they were hot in Belgium, and France. And I'm like, okay, but they're English, or I mean, they're Americans speaking English. Anyway,
never heard of them.
But so they were hot in areas where people didn't speak their language. But they have a phrase from the song "You Speak My Language." Everywhere I go, no one understands me, but you speak my language, and so you want to be on that kind of relationship with these LLMs. Absolutely,
splendid. And I shall be discovering a bit of Morphine and sharing that with the listeners
the
in
band,
a moment.
The band.
All right, Villa. And I think next week it's going to be Kathy. I was fortunate enough to have dinner in London with her last night, and I think we're going to schedule something for next week to record. And so you're back in 2 weeks' time. And I think, should we share what we're going to talk about? Does it matter? Is anybody going to remember?
No, let's keep it under the hood.
All right, mate. I'll see you in 2 weeks.
See you then.
Cheers, buddy.
Cheers.
Thank you, Jeff. That's a tiny bit of You Speak My Language by Morphine, something that was very new to me. I'd never heard of that before. Right, time to wind down in our virtual bar, the Rose and Rockstar, and join Robert Rose, chief troublemaker at Southern Bear, as I pick his brains over a classic cocktail. My sister was in town this week. She lives in Bermuda, and hence the delay producing this and getting this out to you. But I also, sadly, had to reschedule my time in the bar with Robert, which is usually on Friday night, so I've picked something from our archive. Last year, we had an interesting chat about educating the LLMs, which I thought was worth repeating to complement what Jeff and I just discussed. I hope you enjoy us revisiting this chat.
Hello, my friend. Welcome to the bar.
Thank you very much, mate. And how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
What are we going to be drinking?
Well, we're having something called a batanga, which is a drink that I've discovered just recently. I don't know why. It's a very simple drink and seems to be very common, but I've only just this summer discovered it. And it's basically, probably it's because I stopped drinking Coca-Cola a number of years ago, so I haven't really paid attention to soft drinks that much. But this is worth splurging and having a Coca-Cola on. So it's very simple to make. It's basically, so you have a salt-rimmed glass because it's tequila after all. And then you're going to have a little bit of whatever, 1 1/2 parts or 2 parts or whatever you like of a Blanco tequila. It needs to be sort of a Blanco or a silver, basically something that doesn't have a bigness to it. And so then you're going to add in the rest to your highball glasses, whatever, 4 ounces of whatever your favorite cola soft drink is. And I went with Coca-Cola only because it's a classic. And basically then a little bit of lime juice in there. And you have what's called a batanga. And it is, apparently it was invented in the 1960s. And so it's stout in appearance is what it means in Spanish. So there you go. And it's a delicious summer cocktail.
That sounds fabulous. I actually noticed when I was doing the edit last week, every ingredient you said on the drink, on the drink, I'll go, yeah.
Yeah, right.
I need to shut the fuck up when somebody's speaking on my podcast. You'd think I'd know that by now after 5 years, right?
It's okay.
So I was trying not to, but yeah, I love that. Tequila and a bit of cola and some lime juice. I mean, I love a bit of lime juice in anything, so that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, I used to drink Coca-Cola and lime all the time.
Really?
And loved it. And then basically this is just adding tequila to it. So it's like, okay, you don't have to tell me twice.
Yeah, Robert's in his happy place.
Yeah, that's right. Quickly.
Fantastic. Well, anyway, so my question for you this week in the bar is, and I think it's a fun one, because a couple of weeks ago you I mean, we're always talking about your podcast on the show, and for anybody who's never listened to us speak before, This Old Marketing podcast, which is published every Friday, you did a special on your own, and you were talking about content strategy, as you do from time to time, and you came up with the Mullet content strategy, and I thought, I got to ask you about that. So tell me about the Mullet content strategy.
Okay, fine. It came about, and so, okay, where to start? This all came about because as I've been digging more and more into this whole answer engine optimization thing, what I've started to realize is it's a very nuanced conversation, but basically it's a different conversation from search engine optimization. So if you start to think about it for a moment, you go, okay, what is it that we want to make available, right? So if you look at it from the lens of classic search engine optimization, you wanted to make everything available. And the reason you wanted to make everything available, whether it was your FAQs or whether it was about your business or whether it was about your thought leadership or covering every question your customer may ask and providing all that content, was because when you would search for it and you would rank for it, what ostensibly the search engine was doing was spitting your words back out at you, right? In other words, it was a link to your website plus your words as you wrote them, either in a extended meta tag or in the first 50, words of your particular website or whatever it was, right? So, but it was what you wrote was getting spit back. And if people clicked on it, they were ostensibly saying, I engage with what it is you said, and therefore I want to engage deeper with what it is you said. And so you have that in your mind and you go, great. So now we go to answer engine optimizations, whether it's Google search AI or whether it's in the middle of ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever it is. And in most cases there, it's not your words being spat back out. It is what is being interpreted as your words being spat back out. In other words, it's what you're teaching the AI about your content that is actually getting spat back out. And so I've talked about in other articles and things that I've written about, it may not be something that we want to make available. Like we've gone down this road with search, and we sort of, went through the whole Kubler-Ross anger, denial, bargaining, acceptance idea of, okay, they're going to scrape our content and somehow this is supposed to be good for us. So this is my life now. And so, okay, here we go. Yeah. And so we finally came to that conclusion and sort of are working within the system that there is. And so AI is now coming along and we're sort of immediately pell-mell running down the thing. But it's like, do I really want my content to inform the AI engine? Because in a zero-click world, it's like, okay, there is no benefit for me, right? Being cited along 4 other people in answering a question, either I get credit for the answer and basically people go, wow, that's fantastic, and get the answer that they're looking for and never do anything about it. Or I get cited for an answer that's incorrect alongside 2 other people who answered it incorrectly, even though I answered it correctly. Or in some cases, yes, there is some value there because it's a low funnel thing and somebody searched for the best Mexican restaurant in LA and I happen to be cited as one of them and yay for me. So it's a very bottom of the funnel idea. Yeah. So it's not always a straightforward answer to say, I want my stuff in there. So you start asking yourself, okay, it's a different kind of content strategy then. What is it? Well, okay, that I think remains a little bit to be seen, but ostensibly what we want to do is teach the AI enough to answer the question to intrigue people to want to seek us out. Right. So now the answer to that, like how do you do that, is I think a work in progress for everybody. But here's where it gets to the sort of Mullet content strategy is one, it changes the nature of the metadata and how we tag content, because not only do we want to tag it structurally like we did for Google of old, where we let people know what's a title, what's an abstract, what's a heading, what's a subheading, and so on and so forth. And additionally, what are the keywords explicitly that this should try and rank for? What's the point? So structurally tagging it, but we now also want to semantically tag it. In other words, we want to help the AI understand our point of view about this particular article because we may write it in a way that is only meant to intrigue people enough to click on it. Right. So we want to help. Hey, this is going to be an answer about this, or this is going to be that, or here's what you should take from this as meta tagging so that when AI scrapes it, they're scraping the intent, but not necessarily giving that away. And so that's the difference. It's sort of this, as I said, maybe too cutely in the thing, it's sort of this business up front and sort of meaning in the back, right? So you're sort of, it's sort of like emotions and intent and all the soft skills in the back and really business up front. So it becomes the Mullet content strategy. There you go.
Right. And this is something we've been talking about a little bit, right? And some people are calling this GEO, aren't they? This generative engine optimization, whatever they want to call it. And then some people want to stick to SEO because they think SEO's term covers it all, just so that I can get the acronyms out. But this is the idea that you've been talking about, and also we've discussed on the show, which is how much we want to reveal of our content to these engines, right? Is that's what you're saying? Is somehow share some things with it, and then somehow block access to the good stuff. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so there's so much. It's fascinating to me that the zeitgeist right now is that everybody seems to be going, you've got to get everything in there now, right?
Yes.
So that you're quote unquote going to get cited. To me, I go, okay, well, first of all, every search is personalized, right? So every AI search you're doing, even by the way, even in repeat, like you can do this today. You go to Perplexity or you go to ChatGPT and you change one word of your search query and you'll get entirely different answers in terms of the answer to the question. And so it all depends on how you ask the question, but then it doesn't even repeat. So you can ask the question the same way and you get more answers, right? In other words, if I say, what's the best CRM system on the planet? Well, ChatGPT will come back with some cited answers for me. And if I say, is that really the best CRM on the planet? ChatGPT will go, oh no, let me find you some others. And it'll do others, right? So that level of ephemerality, if that's the right way to even say it, about what the search results is going to be, indicates that there's no rush here. In other words, there's no rush for us to get into here because honestly, it's going to be fresh content that will win the day. So we should just take a beat and think it through in terms of how do we want to start thinking about structuring our content going forward so that we don't inadvertently, once again, for the 11th time in 25 years, build somebody else's business model on the back of our content. And so that's the only thing I've been advising is sort of, let's take a beat and think about this for a minute before we rush pell-mell into creating a bunch of AI slop that tries to answer every question in a commoditized way that gets us cited for shit that we don't want to get cited for.
Yeah. Well, there's a few. And one of the things I came across this week is the potential, and I think this is related, is at the moment people probably think there's a quid pro quo, right? I've got access to all these tools, it's accessing my content, it's all super and lovely. But as you say, they're building a business on top of this. And there's a view at the moment, which is that the prices that they're charging for AI access at the moment are way too low for the cost, for what it's costing them to actually do the compute. So at some point, they're going to have to put their prices up in order to make these profitable businesses. A bit like what happened with LinkedIn. LinkedIn went away, and I heard this mentioned on another podcast called What's Broken in Go-to-Market and How to Fix It, just so that if Simon, who's from that podcast, is listening to me now, and what they were talking about was, it was a bit like LinkedIn. LinkedIn just kind of made everything free and it was all wonderful and there's a golden age and we all joined, and then they started monetizing all the features. And so I think related to what you're saying is it's no longer going to be an equal relationship with these Gen AI engines in that we're giving them content and we're getting value back. We're going to have to pay for that, right?
Of course.
Relate?
100% yes. I mean, and that's the lesson we hopefully should have learned coming out of the world of Google. And then, 10 years, we were supposed to learn that lesson in 2003, 2004 with Google, and we didn't.
Yeah.
And then we were supposed to learn it again when Facebook came out and told us to build our websites on Facebook because websites were going to become obsolete and all you needed was a Facebook page because your customers could find you there. And of course, we didn't learn that lesson either. And so we continue to not learn the lesson that, of course, if you look around and can't figure out who the product is, it's you. And so we at some point, it is foolhardy to not believe that they're not going to allow us to pay for priority. And there's some interesting things happening on the other side too. Like, something that's not getting very well covered at all, but I think is fascinating is where the Cloudflare CEO said they're going to be introducing technology that basically allows you to put in a paywall for just AI scrapers, right? Where you can say, okay, yes, the AI scraper can have this content, but has to pay for it. And, that may not be terribly useful for someone like you or me, which, okay, your content is worth, what you pay for it, basically. But for someone like a publisher, like a newspaper, like a New York Times or somebody like that, that's a really interesting gambit to say, okay, I can let AI source me as a source, but they're also going to pay for that privilege. And so there are some interesting things happening there, but I think it would be foolhardy not to think that, like all these new things that are coming out now, the measurement tools from Adobe and all these things that are saying, hey, you can see how you're doing in ranking for your competitors vis-a-vis search. It's like, that snapshot is good today at the time you took it, and it's already out of date by the time the day ends. And so it's at some point, they have to your point, to go, if you want to stick around and be the cited source, all you got to do is float us a few bucks.
Absolutely.
Which, of course, then does the exact same thing to search. That paying for search gave us, which was basically once you figure out a way to game the system, now you're not getting the best content in search. And so you're not going to get the best answers. You're going to get the highest bidded answer.
No, that'll be seen, especially Google, right? Because they're disrupting their own model with their own AI answers, so they're going to have to start charging somebody for that.
That's right. So that's and I think that is honestly the only reason we haven't seen that yet, because I think they still need to work out that problem because trust in the answer is already low, right? Because of hallucinations and what's going on with the current state of generative AI, and so introducing another thing that could reduce trust in the system as a whole, such as paid placement, will only hasten the decrease of trust. So I think that's the only reason we haven't seen it in mass yet, is because honestly they don't want to risk people not trusting the answer.
Yeah, well, I had an example of hallucination the other day, which was interesting because you hear a lot of people talking about this stuff, and then so I use the term FOFU a lot, fear of fucking up, right? And it comes from fear of messing up, I think, and it's kind of comes from the Jolt Effect book and all that kind of stuff. So it's something that I say that I don't hear a lot of other people say. And then I saw on LinkedIn somebody did a post, and it was like a poster, and it said, fighting FOFU. And I thought, well, I'm going to find out who's using this term and who was the original person to say it and all that kind of stuff. Not that I wanted to lay claim to it. I just thought, if I'm going to use it in future, I better do the attribution. And so I asked it, and it said it was, who's that guy that runs Velocity Partners?
Doug. Doug
Hessler. Yeah. So it said it was him. He talks about it in this research that he did, and in this piece he did. So I went and looked at it. There's no mention in there at all. And so then I went back to ChatGPT and said, "Did he really? Where? Can you show me?" And he goes, and it said, "Oh no, he just said things like that." I'm like, for fuck's sake, you know what I mean? I'm having a conversation, and it hallucinated, and then it admitted it, and it's like, it was really weird, I thought. Anyway, that was my little hallucination story. So anyway.
yeah it's that's the thing, right? I find this all the time when I go ask AI for something, and you get an answer, and the answer is like really good, right? Or it looks really good, and you're like, I want that's the answer I want to include in my paper or my post or whatever.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, let's go look at source number 1. Doesn't ever say anything around that. Let's go look at source number 2. Doesn't ever say anything about that. Source number 3 says something about it, but maybe halfway or half-assed sort of addresses it. And you're like, so what the AI has done, as it is designed to do, is combine all of that and put the most probable, like, what's the most probable right answer to this question? Yeah. And it's this. So the answer is actually quite good, but you can't cite that because you can't. You can't cite the, it's like, and so it becomes a ridiculous game where, the hallucination, quote unquote, might actually be accurate. Like you might be able to drink water from that false oasis, right? But it doesn't make it any more nutritious.
No, and you can't attribute to it. Like you said, it's like, basically what it was saying is, this sounds like something that maybe Doug Kessler would say. And it's like, yeah, but he didn't. So it's quite funny. All right. So when we're looking for content that isn't a hallucination, where are we going to find that, my friend?
You're going to find that on my, where are you going to find it? I don't know. I mean, all over the place, really. But my new website, robertrose.net, is up and running, and I'm going to be adding a bunch of stuff there to sell my books through that and all that kind of stuff, including my newsletter, which I talk about like this stuff a lot.
Yeah, fantastic. And when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you, mate?
They'll find me on LinkedIn primarily. That's where I'm,
And will I find you in the bar next week?
Oh, of course you will.
I look forward to it, my friend. I'll see you then. So yes, the Mullet content strategy, a classic from Robert there, and something to consider juxtaposed against the advice on how to get noticed by the LLMs that me and Jeff just shared. I hope you enjoyed revisiting that from last year, and you can tell that I edited it a bit because we didn't have our usual banter, but that'll be back next week. So that's a wrap on episode 323 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. Thanks to Jeff and Robert, and most of all, thank you for putting a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. I've been your host, Ian Truscott, and you can find links to our little band and the articles we discussed in the show notes, along with links to our blog, newsletter, and all of our previous episodes at rockstarcmo.com. Next week, it's Kathy's turn in the studio, and Robert will definitely be in the bar live next week. In the meantime, if you're in the UK or in the US, it's a holiday weekend, and I hope, like me, you enjoyed some family time.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Heather Eck hosts an amazing show called Your Radiant Spirit. Heather, tell listeners about the show.
What if the colors you're drawn to, the creative urges you ignore, and the quiet intuitive hits you brush off are actually trying to tell you something? Your Radiant Spirit is the podcast that helps you listen and live with greater clarity and purpose.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find and subscribe at heathereck.com/yourradiantspirit, on marketingpodcast.net, or search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.